The first rays of dawn sliced through the blinds of Lila's cramped Asheville apartment, painting golden streaks across her kitchen counter. At 37, Lila Brooks stood in her quiet sanctuary, her hands deftly arranging peonies in a crystal vase for a client's wedding order. Her flower shop, Blossoms by Brooks, was the heartbeat of her world, a thriving business she'd built from nothing. Petal by petal, in a city that felt more like home than the one she'd left behind. But this morning, her focus wasn't on the delicate blooms. Her phone buzzed, the screen flashing Eleanor. Lila's stomach knotted. Calls from her mother were like storm warnings, calm on the surface, but always carrying the threat of chaos. "Morning, Mom," Lila said, her voice steady despite the unease creeping up her spine. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, bracing herself. "Lila, darling," Eleanor's voice came through, polished and honey-sweet, the kind of tone that could charm a room or cut like glass. "I need you to tweak the invitations for my birthday party. Just a small thing." Lila's grip tightened on the phone. "What tweak?" A pause. Then Eleanor's tone shifted, casual but deliberate. "Remove your name as the host. It's unnecessary. People expect me to be the face of the event, not you." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Lila stared at the peonies, their soft pinks mocking her. She'd spent weeks planning Eleanor's 65th birthday bash, a grand affair in downtown Savannah, Georgia, where the Brooks family name carried weight. Lila had handpicked every detail, the floral arrangements, the caterer, the engraved invitations. She was footing the bill, too, her savings dwindling with every vendor deposit. And now, her mother wanted her erased from the spotlight, reduced to a silent partner in her own labor. "You still want me to cover the costs, right?" Lila asked, her voice flat. "Of course," Eleanor replied, as if it were obvious. "You're so good at these things. Sweetheart, I wouldn't trust anyone else." The call ended, leaving Lila frozen in her kitchen. She wasn't surprised, not really. This was Eleanor Brooks, a woman who could praise you in one breath and make you feel invisible in the next. Lila had grown up in Savannah, where oak trees dripped with Spanish moss and family legacies were as heavy as the humid air. But for all its charm, her childhood home had been a battlefield of quiet slights and unspoken rules. Lila was the youngest, the afterthought, forever overshadowed by her older brother, Mason. At 8, Lila had spent days crafting a watercolor card for Eleanor's birthday, only to watch her mother set it aside with a polite smile, fawning instead over the pearl earrings Mason had given her, purchased, of course, with their father's credit card. That card ended up in the trash by week's end, when Lila graduated top of her class from the University of Georgia with a degree in business. Eleanor had leaned across the dinner table and said, "That's nice, Lila, but nobody really cares about a degree in flower arranging." Lila hadn't studied floristry, she'd majored in entrepreneurship, paid her own way through college, and turned a tiny storefront into Asheville's go-to floral boutique. But to Eleanor, Lila's achievements were hobbies, never serious enough to matter. Now, standing in her kitchen, Lila felt the weight of those years pressing down. She opened her laptop, pulling up the invitation template she'd designed. Her name, hosted by Lila Brooks, sat in elegant cursive at the bottom. She highlighted it, her thumb hovering over the delete key. The cursor blinked like a challenge. With a slow exhale, she erased herself from the page. The space left behind wasn't just empty, it was hollow. A mirror of the place she'd always occupied in her family. By Saturday, Lila was back in Savannah, her SUV winding through the city's historic streets. The azaleas were in full bloom, their pinks and whites screaming spring. But the beauty felt like a lie. She parked outside her parents' stately home on Abercorn Street, its white columns and black shutters as imposing as ever. The 3-hour drive from Asheville had been a blur of country radio and restless thoughts. But Lila knew better than to skip a family summons. Absence in the Brooks family wasn't forgiven, it was weaponized. Eleanor answered the door, her smile as practiced as a politician's. "Lila, you made it," she said, scanning her daughter like she was checking for flaws. "Come in, we're just setting up." Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and old money. The dining room was a flurry of activity, caterers bustling, vases being arranged. But something was wrong. The tablecloths were navy blue. Not the soft ivory Lila had ordered. The centerpieces were gaudy, overstuffed with roses. Nothing like the sleek arrangements she'd designed. She caught a caterer as he passed. "What happened to the linens I picked?" He looked confused. "Your mom said you changed your mind." Lila's pulse quickened. She found Eleanor in the parlor, directing a florist with the precision of a conductor. "Mom, why is everything different?" Lila asked, her voice tight but controlled. "The tablecloths, the flowers, none of this is what I planned." Eleanor turned, her smile razor thin. "Don't be dramatic, Lila. You always overcomplicate things. I made a few adjustments to keep it elegant." The word elegant stung like a slap. Lila's work was her pride. Her craft honed over years of making other people's moments unforgettable. But to her mother, it was a mess to be fixed. Mason and his wife, Claire, stood nearby, pretending not to notice the tension. Lila's father, Henry, sat in an armchair, his nose buried in a newspaper. As silent as always. Lunch was a masterclass in Southern politeness. All sweet tea and strained smiles. Eleanor held court, steering the conversation toward Mason's latest real estate deal and Claire's charity gala. When Lila offered a suggestion about the party's lighting, Eleanor's smile tightened. "We've got it handled, darling. Don't worry your head." The dismissal was subtle but sharp. And Lila let it slide. As she always had. But halfway through dessert, Eleanor leaned back, her wine glass glinting in the light. "You know," she said to Aunt Margaret, her voice airy, "I always thought Mason would be the wild one. But here he is, settled with Claire and the kids." And Lila, she turned to her daughter, her smile cutting. "Some people just can't seem to keep a marriage together." The table went quiet. Lila's cheeks burned, but she kept her expression neutral, her fork poised over her plate. No one looked at her, not Mason, not Claire, not Henry. Aunt Margaret let out an awkward laugh. But Eleanor pressed on. "Lila's always been a bit unmoored. Must come from Henry's side." The words were a knife, twisting in a wound Lila had spent years trying to heal. Her divorce, 5 years ago, had been painful but necessary. A choice to save herself from a marriage that wasn't working. Eleanor had never forgiven her for it. As if a failed marriage was a stain on the family name. Lila smiled politely, swallowing the hurt. But inside, something cracked. After lunch, she slipped into the hallway, needing air. That's when she overheard Mason and Claire in the kitchen, their voices low. "Do you think Lila will kick up a fuss when she finds out?" Claire asked. Mason's reply was blunt. "We didn't invite her to the meeting. Mom doesn't want her stirring things up." Lila froze, her heart pounding. A meeting. Something important. Something she'd been deliberately excluded from. The realization hit harder than it should have. But it wasn't new. She'd always been the outsider. The one left out of family decisions. The one whose voice didn't count. She walked back to the dining room. Her steps silent, her face a mask. No one noticed her return. The following weekend, Lila was back in Savannah. Despite every instinct screaming at her to stay away. Eleanor had called midweek, her voice dripping with charm, asking Lila to pop by to confirm vendor details. Like a fool, Lila had agreed. The air was thick with humidity. The sky bruised with clouds threatening rain. Inside the Abercorn Street house, the tension was palpable, like the moment before a storm breaks. Lila set her overnight bag by the stairs, catching Eleanor's eye. "You're early," her mother said, her tone clipped. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "I thought I'd help with the final details," Lila replied, keeping her voice even. Eleanor gave a curt nod, already turning away. "Suit yourself." The house felt colder than usual, the familiar scent of lavender and polish undercut by something sharper, like the edge of an argument lingering in the air. Mason and Claire were in the living room, scrolling on their phones, offering only fleeting smiles before returning to their screens. Lila climbed the stairs to her old bedroom, needing a moment to breathe. But when she opened the door, her breath caught. The room wasn't hers anymore. Her high school posters were gone. Her bookshelf stripped bare. The bed had a new dinosaur pattern spread. And in the corner sat a suitcase and a pile of toys, Mason's son's things. A photo of the boy in a soccer uniform sat on the nightstand. Lila's throat tightened. She marched downstairs, finding Eleanor in the kitchen, fussing over a vase of lilies. "What happened to my room?" Lila asked, her voice brittle. Eleanor didn't look up. "We turned it into a space for Mason's kids. You don't live here anymore." "Lila, it's just a room. Just a room." The words cut deeper than they should have. Lila nodded, turning away before her mother could see the hurt in her eyes. That evening, they sat around the kitchen table, reviewing the party menu, or rather, Eleanor reviewed it while Lila listened. Every suggestion Lila made was dismissed. "Lila, darling," Eleanor said at one point, her smile dripping with condescension. "You wouldn't understand what makes an event sophisticated. Trust me." Claire smirked, and Lila's hands clenched under the table. Later, as she stepped outside to the backyard, the evening air cool against her skin, Lila let herself feel the truth she'd avoided for years. It wasn't just the room or the party, it was Eleanor's relentless need to shrink her. To make her feel like she didn't belong. Lila had tried everything to earn her mother's approval. Straight A's. A successful business. A life carved out against the odds. But nothing was enough. Not for Eleanor. Not for any of them. The next weekend, the storm clouds over Savannah finally broke. Rain hammering the roof of Lila's SUV as she pulled up to the Abercorn Street house. She hadn't wanted to come back. But Eleanor's voice had wormed its way into her head again, pleading for just a little help with the vendors. Lila's resolve was fraying, but she wasn't ready to let go, not yet. Inside, the house was a hive of activity. But the changes were undeniable. The table settings were wrong again. The floral arrangements replaced with something tacky and overdone. Even Lila's carefully curated playlist had been swapped for Eleanor's handwritten list of jazz standards. Lila's chest tightened as she confronted her mother in the kitchen. "You changed everything again," she said, her voice shaking despite her effort to stay calm. "Why didn't you tell me?" Eleanor turned, her eyes cold. "Lila, darling, it's my party. You make everything so complicated. I simplified it." Lila's hands balled into fists. "You don't get to erase my work. You don't get to treat me like I'm a problem to be fixed." The room went still. Mason and Claire froze by the sink. Henry glanced up from his paper. But no one spoke. Eleanor's smile vanished, replaced by something venomous. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice low and cutting. "You've always been the problem." Lila's heart pounded, the words echoing in her skull. She took a step forward, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm warning you, Mom. If you keep treating me like this, like I don't matter, I won't stay." Eleanor laughed, sharp and dismissive. "This is my house, my party. If you can't act like a guest, you can leave." The words sliced through Lila like a blade. She waited, just for a moment, for someone to step in, Mason, Claire, Henry, anyone, but the silence was deafening. Eleanor crossed her arms, her eyes daring Lila to make a scene. "You want to act like an outsider?" she said. "Fine. You don't belong here anyway." Lila's vision blurred, but she refused to let the tears fall. She turned, grabbed her bag, and walked out, the front door clicking shut behind her like a gunshot. In her car, the rain pounding against the windshield, Lila sat motionless, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. She unlocked her phone, opened the party schedule she'd spent months perfecting, and hit delete. Every file, every vendor contract, every trace of her effort, gone in an instant. As she drove away from Savannah, the road ahead swallowed by rain and darkness, Lila felt something shift inside her. For years, she'd let her family silence her, shape her into something smaller, less threatening. But tonight, sitting alone in her car, she wasn't angry anymore. She was done. The question wasn't whether she'd walk away. It was how much of herself she was willing to reclaim. The rain was relentless, hammering Lila Brooks's windshield as she drove away from her family's Savannah mansion on Abercorn Street. The humid night air pressed against the glass, blurring the world outside into streaks of light and shadow. Lila's hands gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her heart still pounding from the confrontation that had just shattered her. Her mother, Eleanor, had delivered the final blow. "You don't belong here anyway." Those words, sharp as a blade, had severed something deep inside Lila, something she'd spent 37 years trying to hold together. In the passenger seat, her phone lay dark and silent. But Lila's eyes kept darting to it, as if expecting it to light up with an apology. A retraction. Anything to undo what had just happened. It didn't. The silence from her family, Mason, Claire, her father Henry, was louder than the storm outside. Lila's mind replayed the scene. Eleanor's cold stare. Mason's averted gaze. The way no one had spoken up to defend her. For years, she'd swallowed their slights, their dismissals, convincing herself it was just how families were. But tonight, sitting alone in her rain-soaked SUV, Lila felt a truth settle in her bones. She wasn't just unloved, she was expendable. Somewhere along the dark stretch of I-16, between Savannah and the South Carolina border, Lila's trembling hands reached for her phone. She pulled over to a gas station, the neon glow of its sign casting an eerie light across her dashboard. The rain battered the roof as she opened her event planning app. The one she'd used to orchestrate every detail of Eleanor's 65th birthday gala. The schedule was meticulous. Venue booked at Savannah's historic Forsyth Park Hotel. Catering from the city's top chef. A jazz quartet handpicked for their soulful sound. Floral designs Lila had spent weeks perfecting. Every contract, every deposit, every confirmation email ran through her business account at Blossoms by Brooks. Lila's thumb hovered over the screen. Her breath shallow. She thought of the months she'd poured into this party. The sleepless nights sketching table layouts. The thousands of dollars from her savings. She thought of Eleanor's voice, calling her work a hobby, demanding her name be erased from the invitations. She thought of Mason's casual betrayal, excluding her from family meetings. And then, with a clarity that felt both terrifying and exhilarating, Lila pressed delete. The app blinked, and the entire schedule vanished, every file, every note, every trace of the event she'd built. But she didn't stop there. Lila opened her email, her fingers moving with a calm precision that surprised her. She drafted messages to every vendor, each one polite but final, due to unforeseen circumstances. "We are canceling the event. Please process the refund under our standard agreement and confirm receipt of this notice." The venue, the caterer, the band, the florist, the valet service, every thread holding Eleanor's perfect party together was cut. One by one. By the time she hit send on the last email, the clock on her dashboard read 1:07 a.m. The rain had softened to a drizzle, and Lila sat back, her chest heaving, feeling lighter than she had in years. She typed one final message, her fingers steady now. To Eleanor, "You wanted me out. Now your party's gone too. Happy birthday." She hit send, turned off her phone, and pulled back onto the highway. The road to Asheville stretched ahead, dark and endless. But for the first time, Lila didn't feel like she was running away. She was running towards something, herself. By morning, Savannah was buzzing. Lila woke to a flood of notifications, her phone vibrating so fiercely it nearly slid off her nightstand. The vendors had responded, confirming cancellations, processing refunds, asking for clarification. But mixed in were messages from Savannah's social elite. The kind of people who thrived on gossip as much as sweet tea. A florist texted, "Eleanor's been calling, asking why we canceled. She's saying you're still organizing. What's going on?" The caterer emailed, "We need an alternate payment method, or we're pulling the delivery." A cousin posted on Instagram, "Anyone know why Eleanor Brooks's big birthday bash got axed?" Heard the venue dropped out. Lila sat on her couch, a mug of coffee cooling in her hands, watching the chaos unfold. Charleston's sister city, Savannah, was a small world where news spread like wildfire. By noon, the local society blogs were whispering, "Eleanor Brooks's marquee event cancelled abruptly, family drama suspected." Lila could almost picture her mother, pacing the Abercorn Street house, her perfectly manicured nails tapping furiously as she tried to salvage her reputation. Eleanor's voicemails piled up. "Lila, this is childish. Call me back. Do you know how this looks? You're embarrassing the family. Lila didn't listen to them all. She didn't need to. Her father's text came at 8:43 a.m. Henry Brooks, your mother's upset. Just let it go, Lila. It was a bad night. A bad night. As if decades of being sidelined could be chalked up to a single evening. Mason's message arrived an hour later. Mason Brooks. Don't make this worse. You know how Mom gets. No apology. No acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused. Claire, predictably, stayed silent. Lila stared at their words. The weight of their indifference settling like a stone in her chest. Not one of them thought she deserved better. Not one of them saw her as worth fighting for. Lila set her phone down and opened her laptop. The vendor contracts were still there. But the party was gone. Erased as cleanly as her name had been from the invitations. She leaned back, the morning sun streaming through her Asheville apartment window, catching the dust motes in the air. Outside, the city hummed, baristas pulling espresso shots. Tourists snapping photos of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Life went on, and for the first time, Lila felt like she could, too. Over the next week, Lila threw herself into her work. Blossoms by Brooks was her refuge. A place where she was in control. Where her vision mattered. She arranged lilies for a corporate event. Designed a bridal bouquet that made the bride cry happy tears. And trained a new assistant, Tara, who had a knack for pairing colors. But even as she smiled at customers, the ache in her chest lingered. She kept replaying Eleanor's words. Mason's silence. The way her family had closed ranks against her. Tara noticed the change in her boss. Over coffee one morning, she nudged Lila's arm. You okay? You've been quiet. Lila forced a smile, stirring sugar into her latte. Just family stuff. It'll pass. But it wouldn't pass, not until Lila let it go for good. By midweek, Lila made a decision. She'd been planning to expand her shop for months. Eyeing a corner storefront on Patton Avenue with big windows and foot traffic. The lease had been sitting on her desk. Unsigned, a dream she'd put off for fear of overreaching. But now, with the party's cancellation behind her, Lila felt a surge of defiance. She signed the lease, her pen moving with the same resolve she'd felt when she hit delete on that schedule. Blossoms by Brooks was hers. And she'd make it bigger, brighter, without anyone's approval. The chatter in Savannah didn't die down. Tara, who had cousins in Georgia, brought Lila the gossip over lunch. They're saying Eleanor's telling everyone you had a breakdown, she said, rolling her eyes, like, full-on soap opera stuff. Lila laughed. A real laugh. The kind that felt like a release. Let her spin her story. She said, I'm done playing her game. A month later, a letter arrived at Lila's apartment. The plain white envelope bore a Savannah postmark. No return address. Lila's heart sank as she recognized Eleanor's sharp, elegant handwriting. She opened it, bracing herself. The note was brief. 6 lines on crisp stationery. I don't understand why you did what you did, Lila, but you're still my daughter. That hasn't changed. Come home when you're ready. No apology. No admission of fault. Just a thinly veiled command to return. To fall back in line. Lila folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer, closing it with a soft thud. She didn't need to reread it. She knew what it was. A chain disguised as an olive branch. An attempt to pull her back into a world where she'd never been enough. Lila stood in her new storefront. Paint cans and ladders scattered around her. The walls were a soft sage green. The shelves lined with vases waiting to be filled. Tara was there, blasting a country playlist, laughing as she spilled paint on her jeans. This place is gonna be epic, she said, grinning. Lila nodded, a quiet pride swelling in her chest. For the first time, she wasn't building something for someone else. This was hers. That night, Lila sat on her porch, a glass of Pinot Noir in hand. The Blue Ridge Mountains a dark silhouette against the starry sky. She thought about the party that never happened. The family that had never chosen her. Freedom, she realized, wasn't about fixing what was broken. It wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. It was about walking away from what was breaking you, and choosing yourself. Even when no one else would. Lila's story isn't just hers. It's for every woman who's ever felt like an outsider in her own family. Who's given everything and still been told it's not enough? It's for the daughters who've been asked to shrink, to silence their voices, to smile through the pain. Lila's message is clear. You are enough. You've always been enough. And the day you stop begging for a seat at someone else's table might just be the day you build your own. So, what about you? Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love, not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally started loving yourself? Or are you standing at that crossroads right now, wondering if it's okay to choose peace over approval? Share your story. Drop a heart. Write "I'm enough." Or tell me where you're listening from. If Lila's journey stirred something in you, let's talk about it. And if you want more stories like this, raw, real, about family, freedom, and finding your voice, stick around. The next chapter's coming, and it's only going to get better.